I saw more than half of the booksellers from the bookstore at the end of the world, and almost 100 other people from 100 other booksellers from everywhere else. And I've been counting like over 30 librarians from throughout the 5 boroughs and several of these other states. We've got translators in here from like 10 different languages, and a handful of other small press publishers who aren't on the bill tonight. And fuck if I know who the rest of you are. And in 3 days, we saw more than 230 RSVPs, and I guess we're up to 93 people who actually showed up, and I think that's pretty good. This is, the side of book culture that cares more about, the books than the big name up on the stage for the readings. This isn't a very glamorous event, and there are no free drinks. You've got to bring your own. Me and my friends have the bookstore at the end of the world because when the sky started falling in New York, we found each other and found a way to keep doing the work we love to do, even when our bookstores closed or fired all of their booksellers, as several of them did. And over the last 6 weeks, we've been trying to find new ways to return to the life and communities we love, even while protecting them through distance. And if any of you are really into this Zoom, email me, and I'll keep you on a list because I think we're going to do a few more with other publishers, with YA, all kinds of different communities again. But tonight, we've got folks from some of the best publishing houses stepping in to introduce you to a few books you might have missed, a few that aren't out yet, and a few you will not have heard of otherwise because the entire book reviewing industry is also basically collapsed in on itself. The first of our publishers tonight are Adam and Ashley Levy of Transit out of the Bay Area, and let's give them whatever attention we have. Hey guys.
Woo!
Oh, this is the worst when you see yourself in gigantic.
It's terrible.
We're gonna minimize our faces.
Hi everyone. So thanks so much to Jeff for having us. We're really thrilled to be here and be a part of this. We're actually quarantining from my parents' house, so if my mom walks up here with baby photos, I've set the computer to self-destruct. So for those on the call who don't know us, I'm Ashley and this is Adam, and we're the people behind Transit. As Jeff mentioned, we're a press based out of Oakland. We publish 6 to 8 books a year. We have a focus on international literature. I think tonight we really want to kick off with the new nonfiction series that we're launching in the fall because we're particularly excited about it and wanted to call it to your attention.
Yeah, so we are launching this fall a new series of narrative nonfiction called Undelivered Lectures. They're slightly smaller book-length essays on a lot of different topics that are meant to be longer than a magazine piece, but shorter than a 300-page hardback that are of high literary and cultural quality and literary relevance.
Artistic value.
Yeah, they're good, whatever. The first 2 books that we're launching are, we have galleys of right here. I would be happy to send these and put them in our regular size post box. The first is a book by Mary Capello called Lecture. She's a professor at the University of Rhode Island. She actually was recommended to us by another writer we published, Maria Tumarkin. I wasn't familiar with her work published previously, but it is totally ecstatic, full of life, wonderful. It's for readers of Mary Ruefle. It's a song for the forgotten art of the lecture, about the way that we engage with different modes of speech, and also it breaks down the lecture into its component parts, the aphorism and the note. She's just an absolute joy on the page and has been one of the most fun authors of ours to work with so far. So we're leading with that in September. Just after, at the end of the month, will be the first collection of essays by Nam Walleser, a Zambian writer who lives in San Francisco. You might know her from her debut novel, Stranger Faces. So Stranger Faces.
The Old Drift?
That's
why we're a tag team.
Yeah, we're working things out. It's The Old Drift came out last year, and just won the LA Times First Book Prize. But she also writes criticism more frequently for the New York Review of Books, and this is a collection of speculative essays on the face, looking at how we identify or fail to identify with certain kinds of faces, specifically racially ambiguous faces, the face of the dead, animal faces, emoji faces. It really runs the gamut. She taps into a lot of her scholarly bag of tricks to do some really smart work on a few different, really eclectic media. And yeah, it's a really lovely piece. So these first two books, they're going to be slightly smaller than our usual books. If you know the usual size of our books, they're 5x7. We'll be printing them on a kind of a nice textured paper. It's the kind of book that we hope that booksellers keep close.
We're excited to have a unique series design for this that kind of branches away from what our books typically look like.
Yeah, and we'll be doing 2 of these a year, and making announcements in the beginning of the year of the next 2 that we have for each coming year. But these are the first 2 that we're excited about. Do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So we also just wanted to draw your attention to
I'll be your holder.
The Tree and the Vine that is publishing next week by Dutch writer Dola de Jong. This is our first rediscovered classic, our first dead author, so we're particularly excited to have her. So it's a really wonderful book. It was first published in 1954 and rejected by Dutch publishers for being a little too racy. It was about repressed queer desire between 2 women set against the backdrop of a rising World War II in the Netherlands.
It's not that juicy though.
It's actually very chaste.
It's a spoiler. It's very chaste. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. The writing is completely lovely. We're really excited to be publishing it.
Yeah, we're doing it in a new translation. The old translation that we originally read when we were first reviewing it was published in 1961. This is a much fresher translation. I think it reads much. I think it has the pace of the original, its feverishness, and the real tension that builds over the novel between these 2 women. It's lovely. We've got a lot of good publicity around it, the reviews in the Times and Harper's, and something in the Paris Review. But I mean, who knows what effect that kind of stuff even has anymore? But it's a book that we're excited about now.
Keep it all uplifted in there, buddy.
What do you say?
Keep us all uplifted and happy.
Look, we're not here to raise anyone's spirits. We're here to give a sober assessment of the publishing industry in May 2020, where we find ourselves really at the verge of an abyss.
Chad's going to mute us. So we also just wanted to speak briefly to Esther Kinski's Grove, which we're publishing in the fall.
No, at the end of July.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
No, you say anything. This is.
Go ahead.
We planned this out well in advance. Esther Kinski's Grove. She calls it a field novel. For those of you who are familiar with her first novel, River, it often, her writing style often draws a lot of comparisons to W.G. Sebald. It's meandering, long sentences, the interaction between the individual and nature and place. She categorically rejects all of those comparisons. She doesn't say. We understand her rejection of that comparison to be that a writer like Sebald might mansplain the world to his reader in a really lovely way. We are big Sebald fans, but she allows the natural world, conversely, to speak through her. And I think that truly the prose is radiant. She she, in this book, is layering many different time periods on top of each other as she's walking through groves in Italy. And yeah, it's a book that we're really excited about as well. I don't know how we are in time. We're probably up, but
Okay.
you're muted, Jeff.
Thank you guys. That's really great. All the books that you're representing and publishing and bringing out for the past number of years that you've been around have been all spectacular. And it's cool that you're able to be here and to share those with us too.
Thanks, Chad.
Even if you have like a downtrodden, don't know if it's going to make any difference sort of outlook. But I guess we'll switch over to you, Casey and Grey Wolf.
Yeah, thank you. And Morgan's actually going to start for us. My colleague Morgan LaRocca is going to kick it off for our books.
Hi, everyone. Before I kick it off, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you. It's really, really special to be in community with everyone, especially right now. Everyone can hear me, right? I think my biggest fear is, okay, yes, okay, good. Yeah, so I'm going to kick it off with Dragons, Giant, and Women by Wetu Moore, which will be coming out on June 2nd. Many of you probably know Wetu Moore from her debut novel, She Would Be King. And we're just so excited to have the opportunity to publish a memoir with her now. And so like in She Would Be King, the importance of storytelling and the ways in which that shapes our identity and culture are always at the forefront of Wetu's writing. And this has all of the elements of mythology and magical realism in it that was in She Would Be King. However, Wetu felt like it was time to step outside of fiction and really share her own story. So this is actually a story of her life. And it starts with her as a young girl in Liberia. And then when the Liberian Civil War breaks out, about her escape to the United States and all of those who helped her, and particularly the strength in these networks of women and female soldiers that aren't often highlighted in refugee stories. The second part takes place in the United States and kind of her grappling with this idea of the American dream and how it affects us and her own identity and her own story. And then lastly, Wetu as an adult, going back to Liberia and piecing together her own story for herself. And kind of trying to see through the mythology that her family created for her as a young girl to kind of keep her safe. I think it's Wetu's hope that in telling her own story and kind of invoking this mythos that's so often used in telling stories around Africa and African folklore, that she will bring more nuance to our idea in the United States of what refugees' experiences look like, and hopefully create more of a space for these narratives and the variety of narratives to be told as well. So we're super excited to be publishing that in June. And I'll kick it over to you, Casey.
Yes, and I wanted to talk about a book that is already out. This is Precios by Roy G. Guzman. Roy is based here in Minneapolis. Roy is one of the most amazing people I've ever met. They are brilliant. They are also a former ballroom dancer, professional ballroom dancer. Roy brings this amazing energy to everything. This collection is one of amazing movement and musicality and creativity, and also has this kind of eerie presence, almost like it's like a haunted house party. These are poems of Roy's childhood, growing up in Miami, family immigrated from Honduras, a lot about that experience of going with their mother to clean houses of rich people, also these amazing poems of childhood imagination and becoming with pop culture, comics, dinosaurs. The term Catrachos is actually a term of solidarity that crosses borders and refers to the Honduran people. And this book is very much informed by that. And this book is also like absolutely powered by this amazing sequence of poems called the Queerodactyl poems, which are these dinosaurs literally voguing, drag performing in the shadow of an incoming comet. And the intellect and power of Roy's vision with these dinosaurs dancing along in this way with this wisdom, it's pretty powerful for this moment. This is a book, it just came out a couple weeks ago. It's definitely under threat for how and when it's come out, and this is a book that absolutely will find its way, so I'm glad to mention that to you all tonight. Morgan's going to talk about The Fallen.
Great, yeah. So super excited to talk about The Fallen, which is coming out on June 2nd by Carlos Alvarez, who's a really exciting new voice coming out of Cuba. And we're so excited to add him to our growing list of translation. I think what makes this novel so unique is that it doesn't place the narrative of Cuba in relation to the United States. And I think that that's really important in the English-speaking world to kind of have these stories that are uniquely Cuban, with the United States more removed. The genius of this book for me was how it's so deeply political, but in such a subtle way, and that it actually focuses in on a family kind of dealing and reckoning with the falling out of the special period in Cuba and kind of like the collapse after a time of crises and how that actually affects people. And that's all paralleled actually with the family's own crisis of the mother, who's the stronghold of the family, kind of having deteriorating health. And while those two parallels are happening at the same time, each family member has to confront their own identity and reckon with their surroundings and with each other in radical ways. I always love when a book in like less than 200 pages can pack in so much intimacy and intensity that you leave feeling like you've known these characters your whole life. And I think that's exactly what Carlos manages to do in this really incredible, fast novel. And then from there, I also was really excited to talk to you all about Guillotine, which is Eduardo Corral's sophomore collection. That will be out with us on August 4th. And many of you might know Eduardo from his debut collection, Slow Lightning. And we're just so overjoyed to be working with him on his sophomore collection. So Guillotine is first and foremostly a collection about the body. It's about undocumented migrants as they move across the Mexican-US border and their narratives and experiences, while interweaving Eduardo's own exploration of his body as a queer Mexican-American man. It's a story about grief, or a collection really, about grief, survival, and the intimacy that we create as we reckon with ourselves and those around us. And all of this is directly like fizzled down into the form itself and the body of the actual poems themselves. And I think my favorite entry point when I talk about this book is a specific poem called Testaments Scratched into a Water Barrel, which is actually an overlapping of graffiti, famous Mexican songs, and love letters from one migrant to the other as they pass through. And that visual image of that overlapping that takes place in the poem and that body that it creates of narratives that overlap is an image that has like stayed with me well after reading the book, and is a perfect encapsulation of how this collection talks about the body and these experiences in a nuanced and super imaginative and inventive way.
Well, we have an interruption. We have an interruption.
An interruption! Hi, Natalie!
Hi, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
We invited you to interrupt. That's why you're here. So thank you for coming.
I'm on like perpetual reservation time, so.
No, welcome.
Yeah, I was like, if I make it before 11 p.m., I'll be right on time.
Perfect. You're in the right Zoom call for sure. Thank you for joining us.
No, it's my pleasure. My luck.
Yeah.
It was requested that, so we have all these booksellers here, we have a few publishers here, and it was requested that we find some amazing authors to Zoom bomb, and so that's what you're doing. That's what you're here, just to say hello, for us to hear how you're doing.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I have the amazing part, but I'll do my best with the bomb part. So I'm spending thanks for allowing me to pop into your space. And gracias for a lot of the work you're doing. I can't imagine how you all are holding up and still showing up all of the time. I'm constantly amazed by Grey Wolf and the team there, because I know I'm having a really hard time focusing on things right now. So my partner and I are spending this like shelter in place quarantine-ish time back on my reservation. So normally I'm based in Phoenix, and it's really lucky to be out here where it's quiet, and in some ways this space matches a little bit more the relationship I have with the book right now, in that the book in so many ways is on its own and I can't necessarily perform it. And there's something that I know is very valuable in that. At the same time, it's also a very interesting relationship to have, because the relationship I've learned to have of my book, especially with my first book, is that I have a responsibility to it, to usher it into spaces and to offer it to people in as many ways as I can. And I think if I was back in Phoenix, just kind of the cityness of the place would make me feel as if I should be doing more for it. So being out here, I think, is in some ways easing what might otherwise be a super stressful time to have a book out into the world. So yeah, and I mean, we actually we began in a small emergency before we came out, and that my mother was very ill when we first came out, right before things closed down. And now she's much better. Her health is, you know, she's very strong. Her health is good. And so there's also a way that the idea of emergency or urgency, it's kind of had a different landscape and geography. So even though I know a lot of my friends are feeling exhausted, a lot of my colleagues are, you know, ready for this to end, in some ways I have like a kind of a hangover of gratitude for my mom having been better that I've been able to kind of carry with me. So I tend to complain, I think, a little less than I might otherwise, because this does also this feels already like kind of a new growth kind of period of time. So yeah. I probably should have read the directions better, so I'm not. Are there other things you'd like me to address, or?
That was it. We just hoped that you would. We thought you might be able to join us for a minute, and that was really what we hoped. Does anybody have any questions or anything they wanted to ask Natalie before she leaves?
Natalie, I have one.
Yeah, please.
But only if no one else does. It's kind of lighthearted, so. I just wanted to know what cocktail you're drinking that's getting you through.
Oh, I don't know if anyone's seen, like, I have my Instagram and my Twitter. I think it's maybe one of the most political and subversive ways I can interact with this time is just to make cocktail after cocktail. So I've been, like, you know, leaping. I'm just straight up old fashioned. Like, I love good rye, you know, good bourbon. But really, I've been trying all kinds of things. And so our latest concoction is we have like a liquor syrup, a vanilla bean, ginger liquor syrup, because we're going to make penicillins.
Oh.
So, because I love scotch. So, but right now I just wanted to make sure I'm gluten-free. So this is the best gluten-free beer I've ever had. It's from Barcelona. It's called Daura Dam. But I definitely wanted to make sure before I head out that I cheersed you all. Again, like, yeah, I'm completely grateful for the work you all are doing. And not just for me and my book, but for all the things I believe and have led me to be a poet. Yeah, you all do some tireless and selfless and way behind the scenes kind of work. So yeah, mil gracias for that.
Cheers.
All right, thanks very much, Natalie.
All right, great.
Jeff?
All right, and
did you have a last thing to say there, Casey?
The only thing I just wanted to at least mention, Just Us by Claudia Rankin, which is coming out in September, and then way beyond in March, that I think the book, if there's one book I can like put a signpost way out there for, it's Frank Sonnets by Diane Seuss, who's just the most amazing, and that book is just extraordinary. So I'll try and find a way to talk to you all about that more down the road, and just thanks everybody for being here. You're muted, Jeff.
Jeff, you're on mute.
God damn it.
Jeff isn't muted, but for some reason he isn't working either. So I guess I'm next. So I'm just going to take over and start talking. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books at the University of Rochester, where we do all literature and translation. We also do, you probably know about some of our other activities, like the 3% website, the Best Translated Book Awards, the finalists for which were announced, was that earlier this week? Sure. I don't know, days don't matter anymore, but were just recently announced on the millions, and the winner will be announced later this month on a live streaming thing that we'll tell you about later. But one of the main things we've been doing a lot of over the past couple of years in terms of building a community is podcasting, both 3% podcast I do with Tom Roberish, who's on here, on this call, he was, and where we talk about publishing, about book selling, about all sorts of other things. But we've also started doing a podcast a couple of years ago called the 2-Month Review, in which we generally take very long books and break them down section by section as if it's like a weekly TV show. So that if you're intimidated by a certain book, you can read it along with us, and we make a lot of jokes. We have a lot of fun with it. It's not a very serious read, but it does get into like the craft of literature. And for this next season, we're finishing The Dreamed Part by Rodrigo Frazan right now, and really losing our shit. Like, I come up with a new gag every week, so you can tune into that because it's kind of entertaining, or it's entertaining to me. But for the next season that we're doing, yeah, the Ducks Newburyport season was baller. That was the best. That book was so fun to do. But for the next season, we decided that there's all these books that are coming out during quarantine that are sort of being lost or could potentially be lost. So we're going to do 3 short books in the next season, starting in June, that are all written by Spanish female writers and translated by women. And the first one is one of our books, which is, oh, is this going to work? Oh, Anthony, our little trick didn't work. Is Cars on Fire. There we go. So we have graphics. So Cars on Fire by Monica Ramon Rios, who is a Chilean author. This is a collection of short stories, very fierce, very uncompromising, incredibly fun to read, very varied and experimental in different ways, and speaks to our time in a lot of different aspects of it. So really wonderful books, gotten some good reviews, some good star reviews, and it's something you definitely should check out because this is wonderful. Yeah, super high tech, guys. Then the next one we're going to do after that, as part of the same season of the 2-Month Review, is 4x4 by Sarah Mesa, which is the book that I've been on about forever. I feel like I've been working on this for like almost 2 years now. And it's the first translation by Katie Whittemore that's for her to bring out. And it's a book that's basically about a Waibrini College, which is a boarding school for the elite in Spain, where the rich people put their kids to keep them safe from like the chaos that's going on around them. But as you come to find out through like a series of mysteries and time jumps and different angles, like when you lock yourself in, you're not any safer than if you're outside. And that power structures and problems that people have exist no matter what. So it's a really pretty dark book. We used to say it was Shirley Jackson meets Jeffrey Epstein, but it could easily be Shirley Jackson meets COVID. That works as well. But the Jackson vibes are strong, and she is sort of our preeminent like namesake at the moment. So those 2 books are out now. Buy them. You can get them through Bookshop right now. Get them so that you can follow along with the 2-Month Review and watch the 3% website to get the dates for what we're going to be going over. But it'll be over June and July and into August, and it should be a lot of fun. Now, looking ahead, the next book that's coming out from us is Bluebeard's First Wife. I believe Janet, the translator, is on this call as well, from Ha-Song Nan. You might recognize her from last year's book, Flowers of Mold, which we had we promoted at Winter Institute heavily, got a ton of attention, was longlisted for the Penn Translation Award. It's actually one of the first books that like jumped onto our bestseller list of all time, like very quickly, which is fun and very impressive. And this book is just as good as Flowers of Mold. It's dark. Again, we kind of like trade in darkness here at Open Letter. It's kind of a rite of passage, but these stories they're violent at times. They're very creepy. There's like one at the beginning that begins with a real event that happened in Korea, where at a summer camp, one of the dorms burned down with all the kids inside and they all died. But this mother is kind of convinced that her daughter escaped somehow and is going through like these motions of grief. There's a story where I think it's Janet's favorite one, where there's this really loud neighbors, and this husband and wife live beneath these really loud neighbors. And the husband's super pissed at them. And then all of a sudden they go quiet, and the wife starts thinking that maybe her husband like offed everyone. It's a book that's filled with things like that, which are very, very fun, very entertaining, but also a little bit scary and dark. But she is really, of the young Korean female writers that are out right now, she is one of the absolute best. There's a whole movement. They're all wonderful to read. And if you like any of those, like Vegetarian or Kim Young-hoon or any of the other people, definitely check out Ha-Song Nan. She's wonderful. The next book that I'm gonna push is The Age of Skin by Dubravka Ugreshik. I've been publishing Dubravka for, sorry, I was looking in the chat to see if there's something I was supposed to answer to. The Age of Skin is the newest book by Dubravka. I've been publishing her forever. I published Thank You for Not Reading back at Delkey Archive years ago, and we're gonna be reissuing that in the future through Open Letter, along with Lend Me Your Character. Her book, Nobody's Home, was the first book that Open Letter ever published. And on our 10-year anniversary, we published her book, American Fictionary. She is built into the DNA of Open Letter's aesthetic. If you don't know Dubravka, she is a Croatian writer who left Croatia after during one of the Yugoslav war. Her address and phone number were leaked to the papers, and people were encouraged to go and harass her. As a sense of nationalism, that it was their national duty to go harass this person who wasn't supportive of the nationalism of Croatia. So she's been living in exile for decades, and she lives in Amsterdam now. And this book, we've done some of her fiction, and we'll be doing in the future. This is one of her essay collections, and they all are sort of similar in the sense that they're like very sharp, biting observations about the world. She talks a lot about immigration in Europe, about the treatment of women and female writers in particular. She's very, very funny, but very brutally honest, like very sarcastic and brutally honest. She's one of the best people. I was supposed to be with her this in March. I was in London and I was going to go to Amsterdam to go through her archives and work on book with her when all of the lockdown happened. So I didn't get to see her, and instead had to come back to 14 days of self-quarantine and incredibly sick. So that was pretty cool. But she's one of my favorite people to hang out with. If you ever have a chance to meet her, she's incredibly dry and funny and just wonderful. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention is the adventures and misadventures of the extraordinary and admirable Joan Orpi, conquistador and founder of New Catalonia, which isn't coming out until January, but we'll have galleys relatively soon. And this book, guys, this fucking book. So this was presented to us when I was in Barcelona on a editorial trip. There's a guy, Jordi Nopka, whose book is coming out, his short story collection is coming out from Bellevue next year. He gave the first presentation to this group of editors from around the world. And he's like, here's a history of Catalan literature. It starts with Mercè Rodoreda. And it's like, oh shit, well, we published Mercè Rodoreda. I'm down with this guy, I like him. And then he's like, and then there's this book by Mas Besserat called Joan Orpi, Adventures and Misadventures. He's like, it's kind of like the Sotweed Factor meets Mason and Dixon. It's this imagined like faux historical novel set in the 1700s in which this real life character, Joan Orpi, who went to Venezuela and founded this colony that was New Catalonia. But the book is like filled with anachronisms. There's UFOs. There's like the characters like Cervantes shows up. There's like, it's crazy. That's all fun. And I was like, did you pitch this book just for us? And he's like, basically. He's like, I knew you were going to be here. He's like, it's an open letter book through and through. So we had to meet with the publisher, who was like this small press that hadn't been invited to any of the events. And he like came to meet with us and he's like, people don't like us here. We are not popular. And I was like, you are my soulmate. Like, I want to publish all your books. So we decided to do this. We got the sample from, Mara Faye Leatham did like a sample, but then she sent like a chunk of it at one point in time. And she's like, I'm really nervous about this. And you'll know why when you start reading it. And if you've seen this on Kaya's Twitter, she posted, I think, a page of it. So she invented a dialect and figures of speech that are like fake 17th century or 18th century speech, but it's not real and it's not consistent and it's just super funny. So it's like this wild translation that's like truly swinging for the fences and putting it all out there to write this and to make it work. And it works so well. It is so funny. If you like random picaresque adventures, Thomas Pynchon and fart jokes, this is your book. And I will leave there, although I have a question. Is Chris Kraus on here? If you are, unmute yourself and say so. Yes. Okay. Chris, before you talk, though, I have a special segue for you. So this is when I was in Marfa. Whoops, wrong thing. Sorry, guys. Give me 2 seconds. I'm not as smart as I think I should be at this. Okay. When I was in Marfa on a writer's residency, I was in I Love Dick in the pilot episode. There's me standing, Catherine Hahn. I am a professor at the opening party where she meets Dick.
Really?
I was there for
You're so lucky.
108-degree temperature, and my bald spot burnt to a crisp. And Catherine kept coming over because they ended the scene that they had to keep reshooting right there. And she'd turn around and look at me and be like, I am so sorry. She's like, we're going to get this. We're going to get this. I'm like drinking water. She's like, you look so hot. Because they're like, as an academic, you have to wear a long sleeve shirt and a sweater because that's what academics wear. And it was literally 104 degrees out. So
wow.
Way to you. You take it from here. I will spotlight you. And you can talk about semiotext in any books that you want.
Yeah. So, hi. Are we going to be able to organize the pictures of the book covers, Jeff?
Tell me which picture you want to see, and I can put it on the screen.
Well, I sent some JPEGs to Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
These are the books that I want to talk about that we have coming up. So I haven't planned this in any particular order, I guess.
So how?
Oh, okay, great. Super Rationals. That's next season. Okay. Yeah, okay, good. Thanks. Can I come back?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Super Rationals. That's a novel by Stephanie Lacava that's coming out in September, October. It's one of this, I don't know, for those of you who follow our list, I think maybe you've noticed that ever since or before we published the Cocoon book, Towards a Theory of the Young Girl, we have a kind of fiction subset that you could kind of describe as the young girl coming of age novel. Usually they're somewhat tongue-in-cheek. I mean, they began with the Michelle Bernstein book that John Kelsey translated for semiotext, All the King's Horses. You know, Michelle Bernstein of The Situationists, who wrote a kind of fake potboiler novel of kind of pseudo-Francoise Sagan novel as a way of supposedly making a lot of money, except she didn't. And it's a really funny and charming book about the threesome that she and Guy Debord and a younger girlfriend had together. So ever since we published that book, and that must have been like 10, 12 years ago, we've been kind of mindful of this as a genre. And I think maybe we're towards the end of the genre now. We did Natasha Stagg's Surveys a couple of seasons ago, which was a fantastic book about someone who creates her overnight internet fame from basically a call center in Tucson, Arizona. We also published another Natasha Stagg book just last season, her collected essays called Sleeveless, which is, sort of she kind of turns her role as a cultural reporter and journalist in New York, in the art, culture, fashion, media world of New York. She just turns it inside out. Anyway, the Stephanie Lacava book, it's Lacava's first novel. She was previously an editor at Vogue magazine. She writes often about literary subjects and art, culture, fashion. And the book is just so charming and beautiful. I wanted to read you a great blurb. How do I get off this screen and deeper into my other screen? Can I stop seeing myself? Thanks. And because I want to see my mail, because I wanted to read this beautiful thing that Ben Moser wrote about Stephanie's book. So can I have my screen back?
You're not spotlit in any way, so you should just be able to go to where.
Oh, okay. So I'll try hitting escape. Thank you.
That seems like the thing to do.
Yep, that totally worked. Okay. Yeah. So here's Benjamin Moser, who just won the Pulitzer for his Sontag biography. He wrote this beautiful blurb. He said, "These glimpses of young women just starting out, working vacuous jobs, sleeping with the wrong guys, embracing and then resisting the fake cosmopolitanism of our time is like a perfectly edited film. Dagger-like dialogue, throwaway lines that reveal volumes of heartbreak, hilarious shrieks delivered in the driest of voices. I hated reading this on screen. There was just too damn much I wanted to underline. It's incredible how much wisdom Stephanie Lacava has packed into the story of all the ways people connect and all the ways they don't." So yeah, that's coming out in the fall. And I guess the next one I'd like to tell you about is Ronaldo Rivera. That's Ronaldo Rivera, some provisional notes towards a disappeared city. And this one we really should see the cover if possible because it's a photo book.
That I don't see.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I have Mycelium, Cowgirl, Guibert Friend, and Guibert Stories.
I'm sure that it's my fault and I neglected to send it. It's very rare that Semiotext does an art book per se. I think maybe the last time we did one was the David Wojnarowicz book in 2006. But Hetty and I and other people involved with Semiotext just felt really strongly about the need and desire to present Ronaldo Rivera's work, and especially now. Ronaldo is someone we know in LA. He's been a friend for more than 20 years. He collaborated with Semiotext on the Chance event in the late 90s. He's a great photographer. And in the late 80s and early 90s, he took this extraordinary series of photographs, hundreds and hundreds of frames at now defunct Latino jag bars. I mean, at the time, a Latino gay bar was a jag bar. Same thing. They were totally synonymous. And, you know, these cheesy little dive bars, he more than embedded himself. I mean, he was really part of this circle of people. And he got to know some of the performers very well and their stories. There was a performer named Miss Alex, who was actually had a kind of double life. She was writing a column for the Mexico City daily newspaper called Reforma. And her readers in Mexico City were under the impression that Miss Alex was a big Hollywood star. And in fact, Miss Alex was kind of dancing at this little dive bar called Moogie's. Anyway, at this moment, when LA has probably changed irrevocably, and the city that we all moved to, you know, in the last decades has completely disappeared. The book seemed not just important because it presents, you know, this extraordinary work by Ronaldo that hasn't been seen before, but it's a kind of elegy for the city that we know that has gone away. I think Ronaldo became aware of the need to present this work as he realized that a lot of these people are no longer alive. They led very precarious lives. Some of them ended up in the street. The ones who were able to, you know, pass as women tended to have happier lives. So it's a beautiful collection of this work. The photo editing was done by Hetty Alcalté and our friend Lauren Mackler, the curator. I wrote a long essay about Ronaldo's work, which is the title essay. He also did this extraordinary conversation with the artist and performer Vaginal Davis. Ray and Vaginal have known each other for a million years, and they grew up in very similar working class families in in central Los Angeles, and both attended LA public schools. Vaginal, of course, now lives in Europe, but they had this incredible novella-length female correspondence that they call Chicas Hoy, Girls Today, where they just talk about everything. There's a story by our friend Luis Baus about one of the performers in the book. So, yes, anyway, it's a project that's really important to us, and Ronaldo's work is about to kind of come out more in the art world in a big way. He's in the exhibition Made in LA. You know, it's like the Los Angeles Biennial that's organized by the Hammer Museum. And he has shows coming up at kind of other commercial galleries in the coming year too. I'm really sorry you can't see the photos. Another one I'd like to talk about this season is Mackenzie Wark's memoir, kind of essay / memoir / theoretical fiction called Reverse Cowgirl. Do we have an image of that cover? Oh, great. So I'm sure a lot, Mackenzie Wark, who teaches at the New School, is just an amazingly prolific media, cultural, left-wing theorist. I've I've followed Mackenzie's work ever since Hacker Manifesto in 2001. This is, I mean, I believe this is this is the only non-theoretical book that Mackenzie has ever published. And it began as, you know, a memoir of his growing up gay or growing up queer and coming up in Australia. But as Mackenzie worked on the book, she now decided to transition, and she went back into the first draft of the book and she rewrote it, and it becomes also kind of an account and chronicle of her transition, which she is living now. Mackenzie is just an amazing writer. I mean, as well as having these great as well as having this great analytical gift of analyzing things in a structural way, Mackenzie understands literature in a very rare and sensitive way. And this is just a fantastic book. We also published Paul Precios's book, Apartment on Uranus, this season. I don't know, maybe some of you read the column that Paul wrote for Art Forum. Paul wrote a slant column last month about the quarantine in Europe, which, I don't know, I think was like really one of the smartest and greatest things written that I've read anyway about the quarantine. Apartment on Uranus is a collection of Paul's pieces published in Libération and other publications in France. And, you know, I guess Paul's most famous book is Testojanki, another book of transitioning that came out in 2006. This book is, you know, it's a book that is about living as Paul and about queer culture, but it has a very much kind of larger wraparound social view and extends a lot of things. I mean, I guess most of the books that we publish, you know, Hedy Alcott has developed a very, very strong semiotic list in, you know, what people would call queer theory. We've also published Avec Bear, and we're doing Dustin Guillaume next season. And I think, you know, a thing that all of these titles have in common is they share this, you know, number one, they're anti-assimilationist, but number two, they take in the whole world. I mean, it's not just queer theory in its own little box. It's social, cultural, political theory. It's an entire vision of the world that extends, you know, in a huge way. So yeah, Justin Guillaume. I just wrote the copy for the Justin Guillaume book that's coming out next season. We're doing a collection of 3 short, oh good, there's Hervé Guibert's book. This is Guibert's short stories. And we also did the same season for My Friend Who Did Not Save My Life, which is, you know, hilarious, bitter, caustic, short, you know, quote unquote auto-fiction novel about his relationship with this really kind of spacious quack doctor who had promised him a miracle cure after he tested positive and then just kind of ghosted by the end of the book. You know, Guibert has written beautifully about, you know, Guibert was part of the circle of like younger friends of Michel Foucault in Paris towards the end of Foucault's life. And, you know, a lot of these stories and texts describe that scene. You know, like Guillaume Tistan, he, you know, I think, you know, you could say that it's a very intimate book. It's a work of autofiction, but it's also so kind of scabrous and deeply satirical at the same time. So I guess, you know, cross Gary Indiana with, I don't know, who's the most kind of intimate personal writer that we know. Cross Marguerite Duras and Gary Indiana. And you've got, I don't know, the people that we're publishing on this list. So I think that pretty much covers it. Thank you very much for your time. And I hope you get to see the books when they come out.
Jeff, you good?
Can people hear me this time? Is this working?
Yeah.
Well, we've got another particularly, is it working? Everyone say yes. Okay, all right. We've got another particularly fun guest right now. Just gonna pop in for a moment just before we segue into Nance Mccluskey and Tin House. So say hello to Hanif Abdurraqib.
Hey everyone. Hopefully folks can hear me okay. I've been tuned in since 9, so it's been cool, or 9 my time, I guess 6 wherever y'all are on the West Coast. It's been cool to hear about these books. I was really excited to get to sit around and listen to books and listen to how excited publishers are about their books. And I think I've particularly missed, I don't know how many booksellers are in here and from where, but a thing I've particularly missed is not only, some folks know that I've been like on the road for most of 2018 and 2019. And I've so loved being in bookstores. I didn't grow up around bookstores. I grew up as a bookseller, and I know that there's a kind of curation of community that bookstores have that really makes me happy. And I love being in those spaces, and I love reading in those spaces, but more importantly, I love talking to people in those spaces. And I've missed that, and I really am thankful for booksellers thinking of you intently, because I hope that if there is another side of this, I get to come and hang out with y'all and read in y'all spaces. And not only that, but also like build community. Some booksellers who know me, who I've come to read, like we get ice cream after, they give me sneaker store recommendations, all this stuff. So it's not just like, I believe in the work as an exchange. And I hope if there's anything y'all need from me, I'm always available. I've been doing this weird, these curational projects that just kind of fill my brain. So I've been making this like mixtape of sorts of my favorite poems that open books, like a side one, track one type thing, except for poems and books. And so I'm gonna read, if it's cool, I'm gonna read one of my favorite poems ever that opens a book. And a quote from this poem also opens my last book that was on Tin House. This is the poem, What It Looked Like, from the Terrence Hayes book, How to Be Drawn. Dear old dirty bastard, I too like it raw. I don't especially care for Duke Ellington at a birthday party. I care less and less about the shapes of shapes because forms change and nothing is more durable than feeling. My uncle used the money I gave him to buy a few vials of what looked like candy after the party where my grandma sang in an outfit that was obviously made for a West African king. My motto is never mistake what it is for what it looks like. My generosity, for example, is mostly a form of vanity. A bandana is a useful handkerchief, but a handkerchief is a useless ass bandana. This only looks like a footnote in my report concerning the party. Trill stands for what is truly real, though it might be hidden by the houses just over the hills between us, by the hands on the bars between us. That picture of my grandmother with my uncle when he was a baby is not Trill. What it is the feeling felt seeing garbage men drift along the pre-dawn avenues, a sloppy, slow rain taking its time to the coast. Milk toast is not Trill, nor is bouillabaisse. Bakushan is Japanese for a woman who is beautiful only when viewed from behind. Like I was saying, my motto is never mistake what it looks like for what it is, lest you end up like that Negro Othello. Was Othello a Negro? Don't you lie about who you are sometimes and then realize the lie is true. You have no power, brother, bastard, like the king who wanders his kingdom, searching for the king. And that's okay. No one will tell you are the king. No one really wants a king anyway. That's the end of that poem. A lot of immense thanks to y'all. I guess in the spirit of Natalie, if anyone wants to ask like 2 questions before I leave, that's cool. But if no one has any questions at all, that's also cool. But you can talk to me about stuff for a brief moment. I don't want to take up too much time. Someone mentioned the Bobblehead Collection. I have a Nikola Tesla bobblehead up there that I got when my book came out, but I don't want to touch it because I accidentally broke the hand, and every time I move it, the hand like tumbles. So you'll have to admire Tesla from afar. I guess it's more like that way.
I spent 3 hours a few nights ago watching a History Channel documentary. It was a documentary about Tesla and his relationship with pigeons.
Oh yeah. I read a lot of a draft of a poem about Tesla and pigeons didn't make it in the book. Actually, it was bad, but my intentions were good, as they often are. Bad.
Well, I don't think you're being misunderstood. But do we want to? Anyone else have any questions for Hanif?
Cool.
Movie soundtrack.
Oh wait, what's up?
Your favorite movie soundtrack.
Movie soundtrack.
Well, I mean, I came up. I mean, all the like the black films in the '90s had the best soundtracks, and so I think the one that most comes to mind is Above the Rim. Just because there was, I just feel like there was a point in time where people would make original songs for soundtracks, and now everyone just like repurposes old songs. Someone said read The Prestige. Yeah, read The Prestige. I think the movie's better than the book. Sorry, but you know, read the book too. Genuinely, thank you all for the work you're doing. It was great to hang out for an hour and hear about the books.
If you guys want to unmute and clap them and pause off, that's perfect too.
Yeah. Feel free.
I mentioned Prestige, and now all the booksellers are like book-splaining The Prestige to me. I know the movie and the book are different. I enjoy the movie more than the book. Everyone have a good night.
Good night. So next up, we've got Nancy.
Hey guys. I'm so glad I can't see your faces because this is absolutely terrifying to know how many people are here. I'm Nance Mccluskey from Tin House. I'm going to first tell you about The Index of Self-Destructive Acts by Christopher Beha. This book came out on May 5th. I love it like crazy. Look at the size of this thing. It's absolutely enormous. It weighs in at about 517 pages. It is a big American novel in every sense of the word. It's taking on politics, it's taking on media, it's taking on religion, it's taking on what it feels like to be in America today. And yet it feels historical at the same time. It starts in 2009. There's this guy named Sam Waxworth. So he's like this Nate Silver type guy. He's a statistician who came up with this prediction modeling, and he ends up predicting every single race during Obama's election, and he gets really famous. He's like this wonder kind of guy. And he gets a job writing for a magazine called The Interviewer that's basically essentially the New Republic. And his first assignment is to do a profile on this guy, Frank Doyle. Now, Frank Doyle was this literary lion who has just been canceled. Because the thing is, Frank Doyle is, well, one, he's an Iraq war apologist, and nobody wants to hear about that. But then he's a huge Mets fan. He does these like really kind of gorgeous and lovely, sort of nostalgic kind of odes to baseball via the Mets. He goes to every single Mets game. He's asked often to come into the announcer's booth, and he goes in drunk and says these awful racist things about Obama, and people just don't want anything to do with him. So he kind of loses his friends, he loses his job, he loses every prestige that he had had. And now at this time, Sam Waxworth is asked to interview him. And at the same time, this is 2008, 2009, and his wife, Kit, owns a finance firm that is just about to go bankrupt. So it's this big old establishment New York family who has just gone to the pits. And I think that there's something so essentially interesting about this, that I feel like we're experiencing this all the time, where people that would have been okay, that we would have gotten behind, all of a sudden we're feeling like, I don't know if I want to be associated with you. And this novel is kind of exploring all of that. So what's great about this book for me is, okay, there's this bookseller in Philadelphia named Richard, Head House Books. And he said to this Ingram rep, Jason Rice, you got to read this book. I love this book. I read it. I love this book. I love this book. Read it. And Jason Rice finally picks up this 517-page book and reads it and feels the same way, loves this book, rates every single bookseller that he knows about this book. And we're not allowed to read during this presentation. I heard that loud and clear, but I'm just going to read one line from a quote from his letter because I loved it so much. He says, Bea has written a highly readable literary page turner while putting a finger on our frail human condition, and I suspect we will all be chasing this one all summer long. I feel like this is the book for Father's Day. If you're looking for the book, this is the one. So get it, recommend it. It came out on May 5th. It's a hardcover. It's priced at $27.95, and I love it. Second one is More Miracle Than Bird. Isn't this beautiful? This is Alice Miller. It's a debut novel. This is historical fiction with a tin house twist. It's about the relationship between W.B. Yeats and his wife, Georgie Hyde Lees. Have you ever heard of Georgie Hyde Lees? Probably not. Nobody has. This is the thing that's fascinating. Georgie Hyde Lees is this force, right? She is like incredibly smart and sour and bitter and funny and wry and has like just the hugest brain in a world when a woman with a huge brain has no place to be. But there's something about her that Yeats is just fascinated by her. So they're at a party. It's the eve of World War I. Bombs are literally blooming in the sky, and Yeats walks into the party. He's, I think, 19 years older than her, and invites her to join the secret society. It's about the occult. It's like communing with the dead. She's so intrigued. She can't believe this guy, this famous poet, is talking to her, and she goes. And you know what? She's fucking good at communing with the dead. She's way better than Yeats. She totally puts all of her mind and power into it. And it is so fascinating how this shapes Yeats and his work and their relationship. And then you have Ezra Pound, and you have Dorothy Shakespeare, and you have this soldier who many of us, at least here in Tin House, were sort of in love with. Soldier Pike, who's this heartbroken, lovely, smitten guy who loves Georgie, but she only has eyes for Yeats, when everybody else is like, Yeats, no, he's in love with Maud Gonne. We all know he's in love with Maud Gonne. But there's this magic, there's this communion between the two of them. And it all becomes on like, how can we commune with the dead? How can we understand this world? And it's just totally intoxicating. But it's this feminist story of who Georgie is and how she informed this poet, and none of us know about it. So it's kind of a reckoning with this past. Great book. All right, this one I'm so excited about. Oh no, my boss is here. Thank you. I don't know if that means I'm not doing that well, that he feels the need to bring me beer while I'm presenting. This is Vera Kelly. Vera Kelly is not a mystery. You guys know this book? It's the second one in a series. Who is Vera Kelly? We never had so much fun publishing a book. This book was just so fun. It was the publicity, they just love this book. The New York Times got it gripping. The People Magazine, Entertainment Weekly, all these people came out for it. The author's favorite is this lesbian spy novel of your dreams. And everybody hoped that there would be a series. And I'm glad to say there's a series. This is the second one. So Vera Kelly, she's out of the spy game. She's decided, she's in 1960s New York. It is not a good time to be queer in New York, hanging out at gay bars. There's raids all the time. It gives you this picture of this life that's like absolutely terrifying to imagine. She decides she has to be this private investigator. She opens up this shop. And one of her first cases that comes in is this family from this very, very wealthy family, one of the most wealthy families, powerful families in the Dominican Republic. And they say, we need your help find this kid who's been living in New York. And everything she thinks is true is not true. It takes her on this, she starts working in New York City boys' school just to kind of find out what happened to this boy. She goes off to the countryside in the Dominican Republic. She gets locked in this room. It takes you on these swerves. Also, at the same time, if anybody read Who is Vera Kelly, you probably remember Maxine the bartender. I personally could not forget Maxine the bartender. She reappears. They get into a relationship. Maxine is so attractive. Like there's something about her, you just cannot look away, and Vera Kelly cannot look away. So all of this is going on at the same time. Oh, this book is fun. This book is like exactly the kind of thing we want to be reading right now. It's saucy and it's witty, and everybody always describes it as having martini dry humor. I love that. So it's coming out in June. We're going to do a bunch of Pride Month promotions for it. Look at this cover. I love it so much. You can't really see here, I don't think, but you can actually see her eyes in the real cover. Read this book, buy this book. It's so fun. It's absolutely delicious. Okay, Scorpion Fish by Natalie Accomplice. This is the perfect summer read. It comes out in July. I would say that this is like popping your beach bag kind of book. I don't know if we're gonna be going to the beach, but it takes place primarily in Athens, Greece. And it's everybody who is like having issues with quarantine and wanting to travel and have this wanderlust. This is the book. So Mira her parents just died kind of suddenly. She's in her early 30s. She's living in the United States, and she has to go back to Greece to kind of figure things out, figure out estate stuff, figure out apartment stuff. She's living there. Her parents have this great apartment in the middle of Athens, and Athens is like a character in this book. I mean, you can smell the ocean, you can like the breeze, everything. It's like right there, I swear. And also the creepiness. It's like a post-recession world. The politics are weird. Everything is weird undercurrents going on, but it's still so lush and so beautiful. And she's in this apartment, and she's kind of, you know, absolutely heartbroken about her parents. Also, she had this long-term boyfriend, Aris, who is this growing politician in Athens. He's just married a superstar actor, and now there are pictures everywhere. So this is like the love of her life. Like she grew up with this guy, and now he's everywhere in the news, and she has to contend with losing her parents and like really, really, truly losing this love. So she keeps hanging out in this balcony. And then there's this guy who lives next door, and he's this old sea captain who, for reasons I won't get into, but is landlocked for the first time in many, many years. And there's just like this barrier between the two of them, and they can't really even see each other, but they start introducing themselves to one another. And then this intimacy grows, and they start sharing stories about their career and their family, and then love. And if you're anything like me, you will be totally blushing while reading this book. It is hot. It is totally hot the way this relationship starts developing, and intense and beautiful. And what's happening is Mira is coming of age as a 30-year-old. She's trying to figure out who she is without parents, who she is without this boyfriend, who she is in the world. And you see her getting more and more comfortable with that. And it's just a great, great, perfect read. Okay, last one. The Book of Atlantis Black. It has a subtitle, The Search for a Sister Gone Missing. This story is so flipping crazy. So it takes place in Chatsford, Pennsylvania. Betsy Bonner is the author. Her sister is originally Nancy Bonner, Irish Catholics, people I know well, outside of Philadelphia, also people I know well. Alcoholic father, mentally ill mother, really, really traumatic background. And they have to contend with all this. But the thing is, Betsy's writing the story about Atlantis because at, how old is Atlantis? I'm going to say early 30s. Her ID is found in a hotel room in Tijuana. Died apparently from a heroin overdose. Nobody's really sure. The Mexican police kind of casually remark that the ID doesn't match the body. They cremate her without anybody ever knowing. And this is Betsy kind of trying to figure out what actually happened to her sister. So she takes us back to this terrible childhood. You start to see like why her sister, who changed her name from Nancy to Atlantis, was as crazy as she was. And she is crazy, but she's that kind of like sort of enigmatic, can't look away crazy. She is Angelina Jolie in Girl Interrupted. She is like, she's, okay, I'll show you her picture again. Look at her. She's the, you cannot look away from this face. I mean, she's just intense. So their childhood years, she's always getting in trouble. She's into drinking, drugs, sex, everything really early. Betsy wants to be the good girl, wants to just bury herself in books. Atlanta is the opposite of that. But then she discovers music. And I mean, she's not just like an amateur sort of thing. She's like opening for really big bands. It's like the 90s. It's punk rock. It's Regina Spektor. She opened for Regina Spektor in New York. I mean, she was like at that level. And then she just starts unraveling and unraveling. And you're watching it all happen because you get these Facebook posts, you get these emails, you get everything in real time as she's unraveling. And you understand that Betsy has no idea what's true and what's not true about her sister. But what you know, because she's definitely fabricating a life at the same time that she's living a life, and you're never quite sure what's true. It's like the kind of book that I'll tell you, if you start reading it, you will read it in a sitting. When I was talking about this book at Winter Institute, we had copies there. Remember Winter Institute? That was fun. But we had copies there, and almost every bookseller that I talked to was like, Jesus, Nancy, I came home drunk from the bars at 9 o'clock and, started reading this book thinking that I would read a few pages and go to sleep. And I stayed up all night reading the whole thing. It's that kind of book. It's totally compulsive and fascinating. So that's it for me and Tin House. Thank you. This is fun. More fun than I thought, really.
We liked it too. Our next publisher is also the guy who designed all of the merch for the bookstore at the end of the world. And in doing that, as an act of solidarity with his colleagues, personally put like $4,500 in the pockets of unemployed booksellers. That's pretty impressive. But he's also the sales and marketing manager from Two Lines. And here's Chad.
Can you hear me, everybody? Is this working?
Yeah.
Hi. I can't decide if I'd rather stare at myself or at 100 people. I'm going to opt for myself. That's a little bit better for me. Hello. Thanks to you all for being here. This is great. Thanks to Jeff and Chad for organizing. And I kind of want to start quickly just to remind everyone about On Lighthouses. This is a book I've been talking about for probably 8 months now. It came out on Tuesday. It got an Indie Next thanks to a lot of the people in this room. Yasmin is a total delight. She's a dream. She had a great conversation with Ulybis earlier this week at Pilsen. Hi, Mandy. And it was awesome. She's just a person to watch. We have another book coming with her in 2021 called La Línea Negra, and it's about her pregnancy, another kind of powerful, interesting subject that she brings a very particular perspective to. The other one I want to remind you of that's coming out soon is Echo on the Bay. This is the second novel we've done from the Japanese writer Masatsugo Ono, translated by Angus Turville. This is a book of kind of like a small town. Masatsugo Ono specializes in bringing out the big stories that happen in small places. And so he focuses kind of on rural areas in Japan that we don't frequently hear about, especially when we're working with translations. A lot of the books from Japan that we hear about come from kind of metropolitan areas, major urban areas. And so he's kind of this this leading voice in the post-Murakami generation, as we like to put it. So this book, it follows, there's like a new sheriff in town is basically the kind of cliche way to pitch it, but there's a new sheriff in town, this small rural village, and of course the villagers there want to ply him and tell him their stories, and so they bring him liquor, and down the hall, his young daughter is listening to him, and she realizes early on that kind of everyone is telling these kind of weird, fragmented stories about the history of the village. And as time goes on, these pieces come together, and it reveals what is like kind of earlier a lighthearted kind of easy, light on its feet book ends up being about kind of really dark historical atrocities that, you know, everyone is kind of alluding to, but not actually speaking totally honestly about. And so it's about reclaiming memory, and it's about kind of the reverberations of history throughout even the smallest places, or places we perceive as small. So that's coming out in June. He's a total talent. He's amazing. He's also a translator. And he's actually the translator of the first book I want to talk about in the fall. He translated Marie and Jaya into Japanese. That Time of Year is coming out in September. This is our fourth book with Marie and Jaya. And this book is amazing. My kind of quick one-line pitch for it is it's Midsummer meets Kobo Abe, or Midsummer meets Leonora Carrington. This kind of opens with Herman, the protagonist, realizing after staying 2 days too long on vacation that his family is missing. His wife is missing, his child is missing. And he, you know, he's from Paris. They're kind of the touristing class, the vacationing class. And he's in this kind of vacation town. You know, they go there, they do what they do there, they tourist, and then they go home. But lo and behold, 2 days after vacation season, everything changes in this town. It becomes very, very cold. His bones are chilled. It's raining constantly. And of course, his family is missing. So he wanders into the town, doing his due diligence to try and figure out like what happened, like where is my kid and where is my wife? And everyone who he kind of knows from the town suddenly doesn't really recognize him, and they treat him with this kind of strange detachment. There are weird outfits all of a sudden, weird rituals, and it becomes a tale of somewhat about bureaucracy. He reports to the powers that be that his wife and kid are missing, and they say, okay, well, we have other issues, so you're in the queue now, just hang tight. And so it's kind of this nightmarish novella about privilege and otherness and class and all these kind of other really interesting subjects that Marian Jai, who is kind of this world-class writer, really kind of brings her singular perspective to. And so if anyone doesn't know who she is, again, this is her fourth book with us. We've published her for close to a decade now. But she also publishes with Knopf. She's won the Prix Goncourt for Three Strong Women. She had The Chef that just came out last year. Got a crazy rave in the New York Review of Books that basically the first paragraph, I'm not going to read it because I don't have it in front of me, but it says something like, when will she win the Nobel? It's happening soon, right? It's crazy to read that. So that's coming out in September. I love this book. I know some people in this group here have already read it and emailed me about it, which is awesome. So that's September. The next one I want to talk about is a book called Home. And if I may, I'm going to try and share my screen real fast. Let's do this. Can everyone see that? Okay, so that's the cover of Home, which is the second book in a series we launched earlier this year. Home is a collection of Arabic poems, new Arabic poems. There are 9 poets and 8 different countries represented. And this is part of what's called the Calico Series. So we led the Calico Series with That We May Live, Chinese speculative fiction. That came out in February. And basically the kind of idea behind this series is, you know, at Two Lines, we work exclusively with translated literature. We have a lot of translators in our Rolodex. We talk to them regularly, and they often tell us what's interesting. We learn a lot from them. They bring us projects. And so Two Lines Press, previously for the last prior to 25 years prior to now, had a journal, and that has been moved completely online and replaced in the physical sense with this series. So this is our chance to kind of work with translators in print surrounding certain topics, regions, languages, themes, anything like that. So this is new Arabic poetry. It's called Home because it's an attempt to kind of complicate and diversify our understanding of what our expectations are for poetry coming from this language. So often we encounter books in translation, which is great, but often they all kind of take up the same subjects. And it's something of I think a bias in the publishing industry that we know it will sell to people that speak our language and look more like us. So this is an attempt to complicate that. And these stories are about home. They're about everyday life, domesticity. They're about love. They're about passion. And they aren't specifically, focused on war and terrorism. And of course, these things are in the background because they're very real and they're very powerful. But they don't, it's not, I don't want to say war porn, but I just said war porn. It's not that. It's an attempt to kind of complicate this narrative that we tell ourselves about what kind of work gets published out of these regions. Excuse me. So that is home. So to speak a little bit more about the Calico series, we have a bright future coming for 2021. We have a collection based around the elements. So wind, water, fire, earth. So there will be essays, poems, stories. And then later on in that year, I think we're going to do Brazilian queer fiction. So that would be a collection of various writers centered around that subject. So that is home. The last book I want to talk about is Armada. Let me share my screen one more time so we can see this cover. It's a nice cover. So this is João Gilberto Noel. He is just an amazing Brazilian writer who writes in Portuguese. He died, I believe, in 2013. This is our 4th book with him. And, these are our other books with him. He did Lord, and Atlantic Hotel, and way back when, Quiet Creature in the Corner. He's a freak. He's amazing. His books are kind of adrift. They're constantly strange. They are deeply philosophical, but they never stop moving. Something I really like in this book is there's a line where the protagonist is speaking, and he says something to the effect of, I just want to act premeditation without hesitation. Or excuse me, I got that totally wrong. Let me just find this stupid quote. There we go. Okay. Action without premeditation. That's all I wanted to say. So this is kind of, in a sense, how Noel's books unravel. They're very kind of Lynchian in their creepiness. There's kind of this sense of darkness and doom and weirdness, but it just kind of gets brushed aside for the action at hand. So the way that Armada opens is there's a man who's clearly like face down in the mud. A soccer ball has been kicked. It hits him in the face and he wakes up. And like from that moment forward, it's just an endless ongoing progression of strange activity. So he ends up in a bar. He ends up sleeping with a man in a river who then disappears and is never heard from again, just like randomly. He ends up in like an insane asylum where he remembers that he loves telling stories and acting. And this inspires him to, he doesn't quite know that Armada is the place he's after, where he wants to go. But over time, he kind of realizes that he was once a very, very renowned theater or avant-garde theater director in this place called Armada. So as he goes through this long, weird process, he ends up in Armada, living with his old actor friend and a person who may be his daughter from an earlier affair, pursuing theater. And it's just kind of this beautiful, weird book that is super propulsive. It's short. You can read it in 1 or 2 sittings. And it's ultimately, about, art in the age of precarity. He is constantly poor. He is constantly starving. Everyone around him is suffering. The buildings are all crumbling. And yet he finds meaning and power and identity in his actions and in his passions. And it's really beautiful. So that's Armada. And I think that's it for me. Thanks, everyone. This is great.
What are we on now?
I think it's my turn.
Well, yeah, drawn and quarterly. It's drawn and quarterly time.
Drawn and quarterly, Julia.
Hold on, Julia. I'm finding you. Give me 2 seconds.
Okay.
There you are.
Oh boy, here I am. Okay, so because the last time I did a Zoom call, somebody asked me if I had a drum kit in the room, and it was 2 bicycles and it seemed way less exciting. I decided to use our bookstore as my backdrop for this. So if you've never been to our bookstore in Montreal, this is what it's like in not too wintry winter, I would say. Medium winter. Thanks, Morgan. So yeah, I am going to read from some books. because you can't really talk about a comic without showing some art. And the first one that I'm tremendously excited about is Adrian Tamina's The Loneliness of the Long Distance Cartoonist. Obviously, Adrian is one of our best-selling authors and has been for a million years. We've been publishing him for more than 20 years. And this book is, like any Adrian book, a perfectly designed object. It comes with its own little book plate. It looks exactly like a Moleskine. So we just got the finished copies of this, and it comes out July 21st. And I was gonna read a few pages from it. What I'm really excited about with this is that it is his first memoir. It is a history of his life in comics, and it explores what it means when your childhood obsession becomes a career. And he is somebody who is very, very funny, but whose sense of humor has never been the point of what he's done in his work. And in this book, finally, people are going to get to know his amazing sense of humor, his like tremendous comedic timing, his keen observational skills are like really put to use in this book. And I think the second part of, so the first part of the book is really about growing up and finding his place in the comics community. And you see that everything that's good in his life has come from comics. But the second part of the book is all about parenthood and how meaningful parenthood has been to him. And it actually kind of brought me to tears in the end. So, but the scene that I'm reading is a scene from, it is from the middle of the book when he's just met his girlfriend and they're going to a restaurant. So this will be a non-quarantine experience for us. Brooklyn, 2006. So, where should we eat? There's a Japanese restaurant right up here on Flatbush that's pretty good. Great. Okay, table for two. Thanks. Could they possibly squeeze the tables a little closer together? Yeah, I know. So, I finally read that book you gave me. Wait, which one? What's it called? You know, that comic thing, Summer Blonde? Oh my God, is this a prank? Did you set this up? I swear to God, no. So, did you like it? Actually, no. To be honest, I kind of hated it. What? Come on, it's great. Really? Wow, I just thought it was so empty, you know? Just that played out Gen X pseudo-profundity. Well, I don't know. I thought some of the stories were kind of moving. But that's exactly what he's trying to trick you into feeling. All that quiet desperation and forced ambiguity, it's pure writer's workshop bullshit. I guess I can sort of see that. It's like, just give me a solid plot, okay? Don't end a story abruptly and then try to pass that off as anything more than cowardice. Maybe that's an unfair expectation. I kind of like the fact that some of the stories are more, I don't know, poetic? Ugh, God, don't use that word. It's like you're stabbing a knife into any remaining respect I have for you. This is insane. I know, I'm paralyzed. What do we do? Excuse me, would it be possible for us to sit at the sushi bar? Yeah, okay. God, could this be more awkward? Come on. I can't believe it. I feel like I'm hallucinating. What are the chances? And I'm fucking mortified too, because he's not an idiot, you know? Okay, but he's an asshole. Sure, but he's an informed, articulate asshole. And to be honest, he makes some valid... Oh, that was by far the worst story in the book. Are you fucking kidding me? Cringe-inducing, to be honest. Now, if you just called it a guilty pleasure, then I couldn't argue with that. But the way you talk about it, it's like you're trying to convince me that White Castle is haute cuisine. That does it. I'm going to tell that pontificating blowhard that he's not as smart as he thinks he is. Then I'm going to tell that woman to grow a spine and stand up for herself. No, 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 no. And then I'm going to tell them both who you are. And are you insane? I will literally die if you do that. Please, I'm begging you. Fine. Let's get out of here and get some pizza. I'm going to ask her to marry me. So that's the first book that I wanted to talk to you about, Adrian's The Loneliness of the Long Distance Cartoonist. I have a few more books here. So this is Tom Gall's Department of Mind-Blowing Theories. A lot of you are probably super familiar with Tom Gall's work. And he is just amazing. He is a Guardian cartoonist. He's been doing it for a decade. And his comics have, this book in particular actually comes from the New Scientist magazine, and it's comics about science and technology, and he really has a gift for making these comics that are just perfect memes. So I was just going to show you one comic from this. Oh, two comics, I lied. Cards for Scientists from Their Non-Scientist Relations. Well done, doing well at whatever it is that you do. We still don't understand your work at all, but we are very proud. And congratulations, but please don't try to exploit it again. Welcome to Science Hell, Professor. This is Tony. He once saw something on the internet about your field of expertise, and he's going to spend eternity lecturing you on it. So the next book that I'm going to tell you about is Wendy, Master of Art by Walter Scott. This is our first book with Walter, and it is not Walter's first time writing about Wendy. So Walter's been telling stories about his millennial art party girl, Wendy, for about a decade now, I think. He's drawn comics about Wendy for the New Yorker website, for Hazlitt, for Vice. And in this book, she's growing up and she's going to get an MFA. And so we see her figuring out who she is and what she wants from life. And I was worried that I was going to run out of time. So I didn't put many pages from this. I just put a single panel from this in. And this is when she's meeting her cohort in grad school. So it is them getting a little comfortable with one another. My relationship to form is fucked. I'm thinking about really long string. They should have given the job to a female identified person. Yeah, what I love about Walter is that he is so good at capturing all of the different facets of life in arts communities, all of the like peculiarities and the way that people talk, and really MFA culture just gets totally skewered in this book. It's super funny. Walter just finished an MFA at the University of Guelph in Ontario, so that's the premise of this book of Wendy. And I think it's important to point out that no less than Zadie Smith has written about how much she loves Walter's work. In The Guardian, she wrote she was blown away by it. And then the last book that I was going to tell you about is Sophie Yano's The Contradictions, which comes out in the fall. This is Sophie's debut book, and it is a fictionalized memoir. It is about a semester that she spends on exchange in France, and it's about her kind of growing up. It's a queer kind of coming of age, figuring out your politics story. Because she moves to France and she's like, I'm not a poser anymore. I'm going to figure out like all of these things. I'm going to get into veganism. I'm going to get into shoplifting. I'm going to get into hitchhiking. And it's about this sort of disastrous semester in her life. But it's also about like this point in your life when you're trying to figure out who you are, and there's these, and present yourself as that person at the same time, and also start, pretending like you know about Lacan and things like that. And Alison Bechdel actually blurbed this. She wrote that it's a masterpiece, and that Sophie Yano's tale of hitchhiking around Europe under the spell of a sulky, fixie-riding anarchist is a pitch-perfect portrait of youthful disillusionment and self-discovery. And I was going to read just a couple panels from this, because I think you really get a sense of Sophie's gift for talking about the dynamics of a political community, and also her like wry, self-aware sense of humor about it. As a result of feeling other often in my life, I, like so many others, have learned some important semiotic shortcuts for making friends. Whoa. Bike. Special bike. Fixed gear. Wow. I heard there weren't any fixies in Paris yet. Fixie means bike geek. Bike geek might mean punk. And punk might mean queer. Hey, nice bike. I don't know if Janet is still in the chat, but I also wanted to take the chance to plug the next book that we're working on with Janet Hong. This is another Korean, we've been working with Janet Hong on all of our Korean translations for the past few years. And this book is equally uproarious and hilarious to all the other books that I've just presented. And it is incredible. This is Moms by Young Shin Ma. And it is about a group of middle-aged women who've decided that they've had enough. And they're gonna unionize to deal with their bad bosses, and they're gonna break up with their shitty boyfriends. And it is an amazing, hilarious book. And we found out midway through working on it that it's actually inspired by Young Shin Ma's mom and her circle of friends. So it's like he got her to tell all of the stories about their weird relationships. And it's just an amazingly hilarious, weird, dark comic. And oh, my background is making this difficult, but no. Can't show you images from it any closer, but it's an amazing illustration style. And this one comes out in July, I believe, maybe early August. So yeah, The Contradictions is out in September, and Adrian's book is out at the end of July. And Tom's book has been getting amazing reviews. It got a New York Times profile, and it's out now. And Wendy, which I put on the floor, is out in June. Thanks for listening to my reading.
Thank you. Guys, it's 10:43 and we have one more publisher left, and he's all of our heroes. Dan Wells from Biblioasis in Canada. He's well, he came to this in the right way from a bookstore. That's what I'll say about Dan Wells. Here we go. Here's Dan.
All right, thanks. And it was great to see the Drawn and Quarterly store, even as a virtual one. I'm in the real thing, no, browsers or anything like that. And I just love, as I'm watching the comments, it is great to see Javier and James and Caitlin and Justin and all these people I have not seen in an age. So thanks for hanging out. And thanks, Jeff, for doing this. It's been fun. I've learned a lot about what everybody else is doing too. I wanted to start a little differently though, since most of us are booksellers here. I thought instead of, what I hate about sales conferences, you got to focus on what is new. And I kind of, sometimes it's best to shine a spotlight on what you've done before. And I think as booksellers, we know the heart of our bookshops is in the backlist anyway. Otherwise you're kind of just a smaller Barnes and Noble. Last fall, as you know, we did a book called Duck's Newburyport, which did really well. And because of that, a couple other books I love maybe kind of got lost a bit in the slipstream. So I just wanted to spend a few seconds talking about both of those. The first is Stéphane Leroux's The Dishwasher, which Julia would know. It's set in Montreal. We launched the book in Drawn and Quarterly back in September. And I love this book. It's not perfect. It's very enthusiastic. It's unwieldy. It's at times a little rough around the edges, but it's got so much energy. It's got heart, rhythm, vitality. It's got a soundtrack by Iron Maiden. I mean, before we were booksellers, most of us were, dish pigs. We were short order cooks. When I was a cook, in high school, my nickname was Panic. This book brought back that sense of panic, but it also brought back the sense of joy, the sense of camaraderie, the sense of friendship, the energy, the sense of possibility. Le Devoir in Montreal, it was published in French. It was sort of a sensation there. Le Devoir said it was a cross between Anthony Bourdain and the Dostoevsky's The Underground. And I think that's probably as perfect a comparison as you can come up with. It's done really well in English, but I still think it's a little bit under the radar. A few people like Caitlin really loved it. But I think that this is a book that if you stock it, you can sell this long after the henna artist is remaindered. So please look that one up. The next one I really wanted to talk about from last year, because this one really kind of got lost in the slipstream, was Dead Heat by Benedict Toth. I think the only bookseller who really cottoned on to this one that I'm aware of is Justin Walls. You know, this was a sensation in Hungary. It took the top of my head off. You know it feels like we're living in some sort of second-rate William Gibson dystopia now, but Dead Heat really serves as a reminder that the real dystopia was sort of the hyper-violent, testosterone-y, sexualized world we kind of left behind. You know, it's an Eastern Bloc, Lord of the Flies. It's repulsively beautiful. It tells the story of this group of competitive athletes, you know, who are kind of the first generation not to grow up under fascism or any form of totalitarianism in Hungary, and they're kind of abandoned. This is the Lord of the Flies connection. And I mean, what they end up getting up to is just horrible. I mean, this book divided my office like almost no other book we've published has. So it's not going to be a book for everybody. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but I know every bookseller out there is going to have people who are going to respond to it. So, you know, if you stock this thing when we're all allowed to open again, I promise you it'll be something you can sell for quite some time. So the current book that I'd like to talk about is The Unseen, which all you know about because you guys gave us more bookseller blurbs for this book than any book in our history. And I'm really supportive. I'm really thankful for all that. You know, I discovered this book initially by reading the review of Eileen Battersby in the Irish Times, who was a ferocious reviewer. You know, she did not mince her words. So when she said this very well may be the best novel I've ever read, I thought I should pay attention. But by that time, it was up for the Dublin Impact Award. It had been shortlisted for the International Booker. I didn't think I had a shot in hell. When I met the publisher in Frankfurt, though, I learned that it had, you know, it was supposed to be published in the US, but it fell through. And I was able to get the rights to it. And I learned at the same time it's the first in a trilogy. So we published this month in May. It's off to a solid start, even considering what we're going through. But the second volume, White Shadow, will be published in March. And Stephen Sparks has suggested, you know, it really is a novel for this moment, but it's almost a novel about what we're going through in reverse, because these people live on an island at the turn of the 20th century off the coast of Norway, and they already live a life of extreme isolation until the world is kind of violently thrust upon them. It's an incredibly quiet book, yet it builds up a real tension. And if Dead Heat is a book that won't be for everybody, I mean, this is a book that seems to appeal universally to a wide range of readers. So, you know, thank you for your support for it already. And I hope you can sell the hell of it on the other side of this. I'm going to move from there to another Montreal writer, Julia may know, Kevin Lambert. You Will Love What You Have Killed. This is his first novel. It resulted in pretty much the strangest reader's report I ever received. I mean, it was described as a cross between Clerks and Welbeck through the lens of the Coen brothers of Fargo. It's a queer revenge fantasy on the small hometown that tormented the author of Chicoutimi, Quebec. And Chicoutimi turns out to be a very violent place for young children where they die horrendously, victims of sexual violence, snow plows, and everything in between. But after they come back to life, after they die and they're buried, they come back to life and they resume their normal lives. They fall in love. They discover their sexualities. They go to school. They hang out with their friends. They get drunk. And all the time, they're keeping their eyes on all the adults around them, and they're plotting their revenge until there's enough dead children in the city of in Chicoutimi that they form an army and they blow up the whole city, and that's how the novel ends. It's extremely blackly funny, and it is probably the strangest book we've ever published. but he's also a completely unique voice. His new novel, Roberval, which was published in Quebec and then in France last year, became a sensation. And we'll be publishing that in probably 2022 at this point as well. So there's more coming there. And the last book I'm going to talk about is Against Amazon by Jorge Carrion. Many of you guys will remember the book Bookshops that we did a few years ago. And to promote that, we produced this little chapbook of an essay called Against Amazon that we produced as kind of high-end samizdat that we used to hang. We handed out to different, you know, to booksellers and publishers and just publishing people, until a bunch of booksellers said they wanted to carry it. So we decided, okay, we can do this. You know, we'll do a couple hundred and we'll make everybody happy. The first day we had 700 orders. I mean, my kids were there at the dining room table, you know, I mean, there ended up being blood on the cushions. And 3,500 copies later, we had to sort of pull back and end the pamphlet. But at the same time, we got talking to Jorge, and he said, I've been writing about this stuff for a decade, and much of the stuff deals with Amazon or the pressures of new technologies on books, and it deals with books and book cultures and bookstores. So what we did, partnering with his Spanish publisher, is we gathered the best of his writing about books. So there are books on why the best bookshops are not the ones you think of, or on the strangest libraries in the world. There's conversations with writers like Ian Sinclair and Alberto Manuel. And we have actually, to bring the book up to date, commissioned another essay on sort of Amazon and bookselling in the age of the pandemic. So this is, you know, sort of a great, you know, gathering of mini manifestos and love letters to all the things that we give a shit about. And the only other thing I'll briefly let you know about is, in our attempt to try to figure out how to sort of be a responsible publisher in the age of the pandemic, we've come up with a new series that we're kind of dropping in that we're calling Field Notes. When I was a kid, the only book I stole from the public library was the portable Voltaire. And Voltaire had said something like, you know, 20 volume or 20 signature folios will never start a revolution. For that, it has to be the small pamphlets. So what we thought we would do is try to reinvent the 18th century pamphlet. And we're starting a new series of these little short books that are going to respond to the world we find ourselves in. So the first one will be Mark Kingwell, tackling the subject on risk. Mark Kingwell wrote the book Fail Better on baseball and philosophy for us, but he's also one of Canada's leading public intellectuals. Andrew Potter, who did the authenticity hoax, is going to take on the issue of decline. We're looking to find somebody to take on profiteering, if only to dust up Jeff Bezos's shoes. We're going to do some books on surveillance and a few other subjects in 2021. So that's something that's coming out in October, November. We're going to try to do one a month from there. And I hope you guys will stock them. And thank you for staying so long and listening to me rant.
Thank you, Dan. And I think that just about brings us to the end of the night, except Julia's got a couple of goodies she can offer y'all. So we're gonna pop her back up here for a second. And if any of you are interested in what she's got to offer or in doing this again sometime soon, like I said, send me an email. Just reply to the emails y'all got with the code. And I'll keep you on this list, and we'll see if we can keep doing things like this all COVID long.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, so I got nervous. Thank you for organizing so much. I appreciate being a part of this, and I got nervous. All of the booksellers are kind of celebrities to me because there's so many people in so many places in the US who I never get to meet. I just stay in Canada, and sometimes they let me out and I get to go to a San Diego Comic-Con, which is canceled. And yeah, there's just like a lot of people who I've emailed with for many years, and it's very exciting to see your names and to know that we're ever so marginally closer to being in real contact. But I also wanted to offer people some goodies. We have some posters, and we have samplers of Adrian's book, and we have some pencils because he wanted to commission pencils. So there's an Adrian Tamina pencil that we can send you. So if you want any of that stuff, you can just email me publicity@drawnandquarterly.com, and I'll yeah, and I'd be happy to send you a goodie bag with a tote bag and a bunch of other stuff in it.
All right. And I am going to send, like I said, a follow-up email tomorrow with links to all these books again, like the links that appeared in the chat, and contact info for all of these publishers. And I'll give them your names too, if you're okay with that. And, you know, I'll see you around. Yeah, it's pretty much over. I'm tired.